Isaac Jensen balanced a tray of champagne flutes in one hand and adjusted his bow tie with the other, silently praying the babysitter hadn't forgotten to give his daughter her allergy meds. He hated these high society galas, the fake laughs, the diamond-draped women, the men who barely saw servers like him, but tonight's paycheck would cover rent and groceries for the week. That was enough. "Excuse me," a soft voice said behind him. Isaac turned and nearly dropped the tray. The woman was breathtaking, not in the usual glitter and gold way he'd come to expect at these events, but quietly. Her brown hair was pulled into a loose bun, a few strands curling around her jaw. She wore a black gown that didn't scream money but whispered elegance. Her eyes hazel, curious, locked with his like she was trying to figure him out. "Sorry," he said quickly, stepping away to give her space. "Champagne," she smiled, and for a second it felt like the whole ballroom went quiet. "Only if you join me," he blinked. "I work here, I know," she said. "I just meant," she reached for a glass, "that you looked like you could use a break." He laughed under his breath. "You have no idea." She held her glass up in a small toast. "To surviving nights like this." Isaac grinned, really grinned for the first time that day. "To surviving." He tried to walk away then, but she followed. "Have you worked here long?" she asked, matching his pace as he wove through the crowd of tuxedos and gowns. "Catering, just a few months." "I used to do construction, but hours dried up." He saw the flicker in her expression and added quickly, "Don't worry, I'm not gonna spill my life story." "I wouldn't mind," she said. "What's your name?" He hesitated. "Isaac." She held out her hand. "Ava Jensen." He paused. "Wait." "Jensen?" She laughed. "Yeah, weird coincidence, right?" He took her hand gently, still unsure what this was. "You related to the family that owns this place?" "No, but I know them. I'm just here because I got roped into it." "You and me both," he said, before realizing how that sounded. "I mean," she laughed again, and it was the kind of laugh that made you forget you were in a room full of people who wouldn't notice if you disappeared. A man in a white blazer interrupted them suddenly. "Ava, there you are. The mayor's wife is asking for you." Ava's smile dimmed slightly, but she nodded. "Thank you, Mark." She turned back to Isaac. "It was nice talking to you. You too." And just like that, she was gone. Isaac didn't expect to see her again. He didn't even expect her to remember his name. But as he loaded trays in the kitchen, her voice echoed in his head. The ease in it, the way she looked at him like he wasn't invisible. When he got home that night, he peeked in on his daughter, Julia, asleep with her stuffed llama clutched to her chest. He kissed her forehead, then sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted. "Daddy," she mumbled, barely awake. "Yeah, baby, did you get cake?" He smiled. "No cake tonight, but maybe Saturday, okay?" "Okay," she whispered, already drifting off again. The next morning, he didn't think about Ava again until he saw her. He was picking up takeout boxes from a coffee shop downtown when she walked in wearing jeans, leather boots, and a long coat. She looked normal, beautiful, but like she hadn't just stepped out of a magazine ad. She saw him and stopped. "Isaac," he blinked. "Ava, hey, you remember me. You're kind of hard to forget," she smiled. "Same coffee shop." "Yeah, I pick up lunch orders for the catering crew sometimes." She glanced at the bag in his hand. "That doesn't look like enough food for 10 people. He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's for me." Her smile faded a touch, like she'd just realized something. "Are you off today?" "Technically, yeah, but I do side jobs. Gotta keep things stable for my daughter." That stopped her. "You have a kid?" "Yeah, Julia, she's 5. She's got more sass than I know what to do with." Ava's eyes lit up. "I love that." He tilted his head. "You don't seem like someone who comes to galas often." "I don't. I usually run from them." "Then what were you doing there?" She looked at him for a moment like she was debating something. "It's complicated," he nodded. "Fair, would you want to have coffee with me?" she asked suddenly. He blinked. "Now, I mean, unless you have somewhere to be." He looked down at the bag in his hand. "Just leftover pasta." "Yeah, I've got time." They sat near the window. For someone who clearly had money, he could tell from the watch on her wrist, even if she dressed low-key, Ava didn't act like it. She asked him about Julia, about how he'd gotten into construction, about where he grew up. When he asked her what she did, she hesitated. "I'm in finance," she said finally. He didn't press. But later that week, a black SUV pulled up to the catering company's back lot. A man in a suit walked up to Isaac and handed him an envelope. "What's this?" Isaac asked. The man didn't answer. He just walked back to the SUV. Inside the envelope was a letter with a gold crest. It was an invitation to a private dinner at the penthouse suite of the Jensen Tower. Isaac stared, confused. The Jensen Tower was owned by Ava Jensen, not the same last name by coincidence. She was the billionaire, and she wanted him at her table. Isaac stood frozen on the gravel loading dock, the embossed invitation trembling slightly in his calloused hands. It didn't make sense. He hadn't given Ava his last name, hadn't told her where he worked, and yet someone had found him and delivered an invitation so out of place in his world, it felt like it had been meant for someone else entirely. The sun dipped low behind the skyline as he drove home in his battered sedan, his mind spiraling through every possible explanation. When he pushed open the apartment door, Julia ran barefoot across the carpet, launching herself into his arms. "I drew you a dinosaur," she announced, her curls bouncing as she reached up with a crayon-streaked paper. He crouched down to kiss the top of her head. "I can't wait to see it. Did you have cake today?" he chuckled. "Still no cake, Munchkin." As she scampered off to her coloring books, Isaac handed the envelope to Mrs. Delaney, the retired nurse who watched Julia during his shifts. She examined it with narrowed eyes. "Penthouse dinner," she read aloud. "What kind of people do you work with?" "I don't even know," he admitted. This woman, she's not who I thought she was." Mrs. Delaney handed it back. "You going?" Isaac stared at the thick paper again, then glanced at Julia humming to herself on the floor. "I think I have to." The following night, Isaac stood in front of the gleaming entrance of Jensen Tower, his palms sweaty despite the winter chill. He wore the only blazer he owned, one he'd gotten for his brother's wedding years ago. It was too snug in the shoulders and the fabric had thinned, but it was all he had. A uniformed doorman gave him a once-over before pressing a button. The glass doors slid open without a word. The elevator was silent, its walls mirrored and panels lit in soft gold. When it stopped on the top floor, Isaac stepped into a hallway so quiet it felt like a museum. A butler opened a set of lacquered double doors, revealing a space that didn't look like any home he'd ever seen. The walls were glass, showcasing the city's skyline like an art installation. A table set for two sat in the center of the room, long-stemmed candles flickering gently against the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was already there. Ava stood by the bar, pouring wine into 2 crystal glasses. Tonight she wore a navy blouse tucked into tailored trousers, her hair down and wavy, softening her sharp cheekbones. She looked like someone who was used to being in control of everything around her. "You came," she said, offering him a glass. "I almost didn't," he replied, taking it from her. "I thought it might be a prank." "That would have been an expensive one," she said, her lips curving. "I'm glad you came." His eyes scanned the room again. "So this is where you live?" "Sometimes," she said. "I have places in London and Tokyo, too. But this one's closest to the office." That landed heavier than he expected. "Right, finance," she tilted her head. "I meant to tell you sooner, I just didn't want to lead with all this." "You didn't lead with anything," Isaac said, his voice quiet but steady. "You let me think you were someone else." She stepped closer, her heels barely making a sound on the marble floor. "I didn't lie, I just didn't correct your assumptions." He looked out at the city, needing a second to collect his thoughts. "You tracked me down." "Why? Because I kept thinking about you," she said simply. "The way you talked about your daughter, the way you looked like you didn't belong at that party but still held your head up like you did." "I didn't belong," he said. "Neither did I." He turned to her. "You're a billionaire, Ava. You belong anywhere you want." She met his gaze without flinching. "Power doesn't equal peace, and money doesn't guarantee honesty." He didn't know what to say to that. Dinner was served by a chef who emerged from a hidden kitchen, placing plates of seared duck breast and wild mushroom risotto in front of them before disappearing again without a word. Isaac stared at the food, then at Ava. "Is this supposed to impress me?" she laughed, the sound softer this time. "No, I just thought you deserved to eat something that wasn't takeout," he hesitated. "You don't know what I deserve." "Maybe not," she said, "but I'd like to find out." He picked up his fork, if only to have something to do with his hands. "Why me?" I don't usually talk to people at those events, she said. They all want something, or they pretend they don't until they do. She looked at him. But you didn't ask me for a thing. You just talked to me like I was a person. Because I didn't know who you were, exactly. They ate in silence for a while, the tension slowly unraveling between them like thread. After the plates were cleared, Ava led him to a side room lined with bookshelves and plush chairs. A fireplace crackled behind a glass screen. She poured coffee this time, handing him a cup before settling into an armchair opposite him. I've never brought anyone here before, she said. He raised his eyebrows. Not even the mayor's son or some hedge fund guy. God, no, she said, laughing softly. They wouldn't know what to do without a mirror and a crowd. Isaac sipped his coffee slowly, letting the silence stretch. Then, without looking at her, he asked, "What are you expecting from me?" Ava watched him carefully. "Nothing. I just wanted to see you again. You could have just asked for my number. I didn't want to give you a reason to say no," he blinked. "You think I would have," she shrugged. "You've got a life, a daughter, responsibilities. I wasn't sure if there was room for someone like me in that equation." He set the cup down. "You won't know unless you ask." She leaned forward slightly. "Then I'm asking now. Would you want to see me outside of towers and tuxedos?" He didn't answer right away. His chest felt tight, like something big was shifting inside him, something he couldn't name yet. "I'd have to bring Julia with me sometimes. I don't have help." "Then bring her," Ava said. "I'd like to meet her." He looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she meant it, not just the words, the whole damn thing. He leaned back in the chair, unsure whether he was stepping into something incredible or something that would burn him alive. "Okay," he said quietly. "Let's see where this goes." The first time Ava met Julia, she brought a bag of oranges and a stuffed octopus. Isaac opened the apartment door holding a dish towel, his shirt damp at the shoulder where Julia had dumped half a cup of water during an impromptu science experiment. "She's in perpetual motion," he warned as Ava stepped inside, eyeing the scattered crayons, glitter glue, and a toppled cereal box on the floor. "I brought reinforcements," Ava said, holding out the octopus toy like a peace offering. From the hallway, a small voice squealed, "An octopus." Julia barreled out in mismatched socks, hair in a lopsided ponytail, and launched herself at the toy. Then she glanced up at Ava with wide eyes. "Are you my daddy's friend?" Isaac watched Ava kneel down, her movements unhurried. "I hope so." Julia tapped the octopus. "He needs a name." Ava tilted her head. "What about Admiral Wiggly?" Julia's face lit up. "Perfect." Later, while Julia constructed a pillow fort in the living room, Isaac poured Ava a glass of lemonade in the kitchen. "You didn't have to bring anything," he said, nodding toward the oranges she'd stacked on the counter. "I didn't want to show up empty-handed, and I wasn't sure if she had any allergies." "She does. But not to citrus." He glanced toward the living room where Julia was demanding Admiral Wiggly guard the fort entrance. "She likes you. I like her too." Isaac leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So what now? You want to keep seeing me?" "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." He studied her. "This isn't usually your world, is it?" She shook her head. "But I'm not asking you to change yours. I want to know it." He let that sit for a moment before nodding slowly. "Then you should probably come with us to the park Saturday." Julia's got her eye on the monkey bars. By the following weekend, Ava had traded her heels for sneakers and was holding a juice pouch while Julia raced toward the playground, yelling about invisible pirates. "You okay?" Isaac asked, watching her scan the park like she was expecting paparazzi to leap out of the sandbox. "I'm fine. Just not used to being stared at by toddlers." "You're doing great," he said. "You haven't stepped on any Legos." She smiled without answering, but when Julia dragged her onto the seesaw 10 minutes later, she didn't hesitate. Isaac sat on a bench nearby, watching them. The way Ava didn't flinch when a kid threw a handful of sand in her direction. How she tied Julia's shoelace without being asked. How she laughed when Julia insisted the octopus had to take a turn on the swings. "Your friend's pretty," a voice beside him said. It was Mark, one of the other dads from the neighborhood, holding a juice box and wearing a Red Sox cap. "Yeah," Isaac said, not bothering to hide it. Mark took a sip. "She looks like she walked out of a magazine. Who is she?" Isaac didn't answer. He was still figuring that out himself. When the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long across the grass, Julia declared it was time to get ice cream. Ava didn't blink when Isaac warned her the truck nearby only took cash and the cone sizes were absurd. She bought 3. They sat on the curb, sticky fingers and all. Ava had chocolate on her cheek, which Julia tried to wipe off with a napkin before giving up and licking her thumb. Isaac laughed. "You're officially in the club now." Ava raised an eyebrow. "What club?" "People who have been cleaned by a 5-year-old. "You're marked forever." Julia leaned against Ava's side, yawning. "Can she come next weekend too?" Ava looked at Isaac. "If that's okay." He didn't answer right away. He was watching how natural this looked, the 3 of them sitting on the curb like they did it every Saturday. "Yeah," he said. "It's okay." Over the next few weeks, everything shifted, not all at once, quietly. Like snow melting into the ground, Ava started showing up more often. Sometimes she brought books for Julia. Sometimes she brought pasta from a place downtown Isaac had never heard of. Once, she fixed a broken drawer in the kitchen without waiting to be asked. She never made a show of her money. Never commented on the peeling wallpaper or the squeaky faucet. She just fit herself into their days like she'd always been meant to. One night after Julia was asleep, Ava stood in the doorway of the tiny kitchen and said, "This place feels more real than my penthouse." Isaac looked up from the sink. "Because it leaks, because it breathes." He wiped his hands on a towel. "You ever think about what that means?" "You and me, I think about it all the time." He stepped closer. "Then tell me the part I'm missing." She didn't look away. "In my world, people pretend not to care about who you are until they know your last name. Then they care too much. You didn't do that. You didn't need me to be anyone but the person standing in front of you. And now I want to be in your world fully." He hesitated. "You sure about that?" She reached for his hand. "I've never been more certain." He kissed her then, not rushed, not unsure, just real. And outside, the city kept moving, unaware that something rare had just begun inside a cramped apartment with a leaky window and a girl who believed in octopus admirals. But Isaac knew, and so did Ava. Isaac stood at the edge of the marble balcony, the wind tugging at his sleeves as the last rays of sunlight dipped behind the skyline. The rooftop of the Jensen Foundation's Gala venue stretched out behind him, an exclusive, velvet-roped celebration of Ava's latest philanthropic initiative, attended by governors, CEOs, and enough international press to make his shirt collar feel 10 sizes too tight. He adjusted the cufflinks Ava had given him that morning, onyx set in platinum, delivered in a box small enough to make him nervous until he opened it. A note had been tucked inside. "Just wear them. Tonight's not about hiding." He hadn't realized how much of himself he'd been holding back until he read those 6 words. The doors behind him opened, and Ava stepped onto the balcony. Her gown shimmered like starlight, but it wasn't the dress that made him stare, it was the way she looked at him. Like she had since the park, since the first time she touched Julia's hand and didn't flinch at the glitter. "You disappeared," she said, joining him at the railing. "I needed a second." "Too much," he exhaled slowly. "Not in a bad way, just unreal." She leaned her arms on the stone. "It's real now." He studied her profile. "You're standing in front of your board, your investors, half the state, and you brought me here. That's not nothing." "You're not nothing." He turned to her fully. "You're sure this doesn't blow up your carefully curated life?" She looked up at him, calm. "I stopped curating it the second I showed up at your apartment with oranges and a stuffed octopus." He smiled, but it faded into something quieter. "I've been thinking about what this means long term, so have I. I don't want Julia to grow up thinking love only works if someone bends themselves out of shape to fit into someone else's life." Ava's voice was steady. "Then let's build something that fits all of us." He hesitated. "You really want that?" "I want a home that feels like a Sunday morning with pancakes and laundry. I want to sit on a couch that's too small because there's a kid between us who refuses to sleep in her own bed. I want you, and Julia, not just when it's easy." He swallowed hard. "You scare me." "Why?" "Because you make me think things like this could actually last." She reached for his hand. "Then let's stop thinking and start living it." Inside, the music swelled as guests raised their glasses to toast Ava's surprise announcement. A multi-million-dollar investment into affordable housing and community centers, an initiative she'd quietly renamed the J&J Project. Isaac had only realized what the initials stood for when he saw the logo on the printed programs. As the applause echoed through the rooftop, Ava led him back into the crowd, her hand firm in his. She introduced him to board members, journalists, and ambassadors without hesitation. Not as a guest. Not as a date, as Isaac. He watched her move through the room like a force of nature fluent in diplomacy and finance, but when their eyes met across the floor, all he saw was the woman who had once knelt beside a pillow fort just to make Julia laugh. After the event, they returned to the penthouse. Mrs. Delaney had stayed with Julia, and now the little girl was curled up asleep in Ava's bed, her arms wrapped around Admiral Wiggly. Isaac sat on the edge of the mattress and brushed a stray curl from her cheek. "She didn't want to sleep without you," Ava whispered behind him. "She's getting used to this. You." Ava crouched beside him. "And you," he turned toward her. "I already did." There was a pause. Then Ava stood and crossed the room to a drawer, pulling something out and returning with it clasped in her hand. She sat beside him again and slowly opened her palm. A ring, simple, unflashy, a brushed gold band, no diamonds, just real. "I'm not asking you to change your life," she said. "I'm asking if I can be part of it, not tomorrow, not next year, now, all in, you, me, Julia." He stared at it, stunned. "You're proposing to me." "I am," she said. "Unless you want to beat me to it." His throat tightened. "Ava, I know it's fast. I know this started in the most unlikely place, but I've watched you keep your promises. I've watched you fight for your daughter without complaint. I've watched you show up. Every single time. And you still want this. I've never wanted anything more." He looked back at Julia, peaceful and safe, then back at the woman who had changed everything. "I didn't think I'd ever have this kind of life," he said. "Not after what I've been through." She took his hand. "Then let's build a new one. Together." He nodded slowly, the weight of it hitting him all at once. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny velvet pouch, the one he'd hidden there that morning after spending the last of his savings at a small jeweler near the train station. "I wasn't planning to do it tonight," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate band with a tiny engraving on the inside. J&J. Ava's eyes widened. "But you beat me to it," he added. "So now I'm just trying to keep up." They both laughed, quiet and full, before she slid her ring onto his finger, and he did the same. Later that week, they stood in front of a judge at City Hall, with Julia holding a bouquet of wildflowers and wearing a dress 2 sizes too big because she'd insisted on picking it herself. Ava wore a navy suit. Isaac wore the same 2 snug blazer, but this time with pride. There were no cameras. No press, just them. And when the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Julia clapped so hard she dropped the bouquet. A month later, they moved into a brownstone Ava had secretly renovated in a quiet neighborhood with a garden and a swing set. The penthouse stayed sometimes useful, sometimes empty. But the brownstone became home. Isaac kept working part-time now, with Ava's encouragement and a schedule that let him walk Julia to school. Ava shifted her foundation's focus to family programs and local initiatives. And on weekends, the 3 of them made pancakes and built pillow forts and argued over which movie to watch. And when Isaac tucked Julia in at night, she always asked the same thing. "Are we happy now?" And he always gave the same answer. "We are," because they were, completely. The scent of fresh paint clung to the air as Ava stepped back from the canvas, her brush still dripping lilac-colored acrylic. A streak of purple ran down her arm, but she didn't care. Behind her, the soft murmur of Isaac's voice reading aloud filtered in from the backyard, where Julia was curled up in a hammock, half asleep, listening to a story about a girl who found a dragon in her apple tree. It had been 6 months since the courthouse wedding, and life had settled into a rhythm so seamless it felt like it had been waiting for them all along. Ava rinsed the brush and set it in the jar near the windowsill, glancing outside. Isaac had grown a little more relaxed in his stance, his shoulders no longer carrying the constant tension of holding the world up. The lines around his eyes were still there, but now they deepened more often from laughter than exhaustion. Julia had drawn a rainbow on the side of the garage last week, and instead of scrubbing it off, Isaac had added clouds and a sun. They were a family now. Not because of vows or rings or shared addresses, but because of the little things, the quiet breakfasts, the sleepy kisses. The way Ava's shoes were always next to Isaac's by the door, and Julia's rain boots always in between. That night after Julia was asleep, Ava found Isaac on the roof. The brownstone had a narrow stairwell that led to a flat terrace above the third floor, where they'd strung fairy lights and rolled out a thick rug. A small table held 2 glasses of wine, untouched. Ava stepped into the glow of the lights and sat beside him. "You look like your head somewhere else, just thinking. Dangerous," she teased. He glanced over, his expression softer than usual. "We've built something pretty incredible, haven't we?" She nodded, pulling her knees up. "And we didn't even need a blueprint. I thought I'd lost the chance for this." "I know," she said. "I thought I didn't deserve it." He turned toward her, his voice low. "I keep waiting for it to fall apart." "It won't," she said, "because we're not holding it together with pretending. This is all real." He reached for her hand. "There's something I want to ask you." She raised an eyebrow. "We're already married. You going for round 2? Not exactly." He pulled something from his jacket pocket. A key, not to their home, to a storefront. Ava frowned. "What is that?" He looked nervous, which wasn't like him. "I bought the space on Maple Avenue, the one near the school." She blinked. "You what?" "I've been saving, and with everything stable now, I thought maybe it was time. I want to open a workshop again. For real this time, full time. Not just odd jobs." Ava stared at him, stunned. "You didn't even tell me you were looking." "I didn't want to risk disappointing you if it didn't work out." "But it did," he nodded. "I signed the lease yesterday." She was silent for a long beat, then leaned in and kissed him, slow and sure. "You have no idea how proud I am of you. I wanted to build something that's mine, too. Something Julia can come visit after school. Something you can stop by when you're tired of boardrooms and gala speeches. I think I just fell in love with you all over again." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're not the only one." They sat in silence for a while, watching the soft flicker of lights overhead, the city breathing around them. The next morning, Ava woke to the sound of Julia's bare feet padding down the hall and her tiny voice calling, "Mama, Ava, can I wear the tutu today?" "Even if it's not ballet," Ava slid out of bed, already nodding before she reached the door. "Only if you promise to twirl responsibly." Julia grinned. "Deal." Later that week, they hosted a small party in the backyard to celebrate the grand opening of Isaac's workshop. Neighbors came, some old friends, and even a few of Ava's colleagues, who were still adjusting to seeing her in cargo pants and sneakers instead of heels and suits. The workshop itself was a 2-room space with wide windows, sawdust on the floor, and hand-built shelves already filled with tools. Julia had painted a sign that read Jensen and Daughter Carpentry, and it hung proudly over the door. "I didn't approve that name," Isaac said when he saw it. "Too late," Ava replied. "It's perfect." As the sun set, Isaac pulled Ava into a slow dance in the middle of the yard, barefoot on the grass, the faint sound of an old jazz record playing from a speaker in the window. "I've got everything I ever wanted," he whispered. Ava rested her head on his chest. "And I never even knew what I wanted until I met you." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You were worth every hard year I went through to get here. And you were the risk I didn't know I needed to take." They stayed like that for a long time, swaying under the stars, while Julia chased fireflies in the dark, giggling with a flashlight in one hand and Admiral Wiggly in the other. Years passed, seasons changed. The brownstone always smelled like cinnamon and sawdust and sun-warmed laundry. Julia grew taller, her stuffed octopus eventually replaced by sketchbooks and science kits, but she never stopped believing in magic. Ava expanded her foundation into education grants, and Isaac's workshop became a neighborhood staple. And through it all, they never forgot the night they met, not because of the gala or the champagne or the skyline, but because of what it sparked. A glance that turned into a question. A question that turned into everything, and in the end, they weren't just happy, they were home.